My name is Terry P. Meyer, and I am 35 years old. I used to think embarrassment was something you laughed about later, the kind of story you told at dinner parties once enough time had passed. This wasn't that kind. This was the kind that settles into your chest and stays there, heavy and unmoving, until you finally admit what you've been trying not to see. It happened at my younger sister Ava's wedding, the only sibling I have, the one my parents always said was the miracle. Growing up, Ava and I were close, or at least I believed we were. Somewhere along the way, especially after my husband and I found out we couldn't have children, the dynamic shifted. It didn't happen all at once. It was quiet, subtle, wrapped in smiles and concern that never really sounded like concern. Fewer calls, awkward pauses at family dinners, questions that weren't really questions. Still no luck? Have you tried another specialist? Maybe you're just too stressed. I learned to answer politely and change the subject. My husband hated those conversations. I kept telling him it would pass, that my parents were just disappointed and didn't know how to handle it. 6 months before the wedding, Ava called me in tears. She said they were short on their budget, that prices had gone up, that even a little help would mean everything. I asked how much she needed. She mentioned flowers, decorations, small things. I wired $2,000 that night. No thank you message, no follow-up. I told myself that's what family does. The actual invitation came 3 weeks before the ceremony, after months of silence. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't even a direct message. It was a group text. Hey, Terry, you and Mark can come now. We had some cancellations. The word now sat there like we'd been on standby. Mark looked at me and asked if I really wanted to go. I said yes. I wanted to believe that showing up still mattered. The venue was small, intimate, about 30 guests. We arrived early. I held Mark's arm as we walked in, feeling that familiar tension settle in my shoulders. We checked the seating chart. No Terry, no Mark, just a handwritten note at the bottom, rushed black ink, an arrow pointing to the far corner. Overflow seating. We followed the arrow and found it. A single metal folding chair in the back corner of the room. Not 2 chairs. 1. A yellow sticky note taped to it in all caps, underlined, like someone wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. Overflow. I stood there staring at it, my brain trying to catch up with what my eyes were already telling me. That's when my cousin leaned in and whispered, "They didn't think you'd actually come." I felt Mark's hand tighten around mine. I didn't say a word. I just walked past the chair, straight through the room, toward the gift table. I knew exactly where our card was because I had placed it there myself when we arrived. A simple white envelope near the top of the box, my handwriting neat and careful, as if being precise could soften what it contained. I reached in without hesitation and slid it out. The check inside caught the light as I pulled it halfway free, the number clear enough that a few nearby relatives went quiet when they noticed. $6,000. On top of the $2,000 I'd already wired months earlier. For a wedding that, as I'd later learn, cost barely more than that, it wasn't an oversight. It was a plan. Nathan's eyes widened. Someone behind me whispered. I didn't look around. I didn't feel the need to perform outrage or grief. I felt something cleaner than anger, something final. I said it calmly, like I was stating a fact to myself more than anyone else. Guess I overflowed out. Then I turned and walked away. Mark followed without a word. Behind us, I heard my uncle call my name and my mother's voice cut through the room, sharp and panicked. Stop her! No one moved. Not really. The people who had watched me be seated in a corner didn't suddenly grow legs to chase me. We stepped outside into the sunlight, the music muffled behind closed doors, and got into the car. The engine started. The venue disappeared in the rearview mirror. We didn't go home. We drove to a small cafe at the edge of town, the kind of place with chipped mugs and a bell on the door. We sat in silence for a while. The check folded back into its envelope on the table between us like evidence. Mark was the first to speak. I've been trying to tell you, he said gently, not accusing. I nodded. That was all I had. The storm didn't wait long. By the next morning, the house felt loaded with quiet, the kind that means something is about to break. Mark was already in the kitchen, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, staring at a message with that frozen look he gets just before he decides something is done. He held the phone out to me. It was from my mother, long, formal, cold. She wrote about misunderstandings and embarrassment, about Ava crying all night, about how I humiliated my sister and the family on her wedding day. There was no mention of the chair, no mention of the invitation that arrived now, no mention of the money we'd already given. The narrative was complete without facts. My phone buzzed again. Ava, first a missed call, then a message. You ruined everything. 3 minutes later, you're pathetic. That was it. No explanation, no acknowledgement, just judgment. By 11, the doorbell rang. Mark opened it. My mother stood there, holding a grocery bag like she was visiting a neighbor. She said she needed to speak with me. Mark didn't step aside. No, you don't, he said. She tried again, louder, calling my name into the hallway like volume could summon obedience. I didn't answer. Mark closed the door. Half an hour later, Ava showed up. No groceries this time, just raw nerves and a practiced frown. Mark didn't let her finish her first sentence. He told her we weren't interested. Ava raised her voice. Mark raised the volume of his silence. She stood there a moment longer, shaking her head like she couldn't believe we weren't folding the way we always did, then turned and left. After that, the calls multiplied. Uncles, cousins. A woman I hadn't spoken to since my grandmother's funeral rang to say she was shocked. Everyone was shocked. Everyone suddenly had an opinion. No one had anything to say when Ava sent that group text. No one objected when we were asked to help pay. Now they wanted to mediate. Someone even said, "It's just a chair," as if a sticky note in the corner wasn't the final proof that I didn't belong. Mark didn't hesitate. He started blocking numbers mid-call. He logged into my social media and deleted it for me. He handed me my phone and said, "You don't need this noise anymore." I hesitated, not because he was wrong, but because this was all I'd ever known. Chasing approval, paying for peace. Mark had seen it years before I did. 2 days later, he picked up the phone and called Ava. I didn't know what he would say. I thought maybe he'd try to smooth things over. I sat in the next room and listened. Ava's voice carried, sharp and loud. Mark waited until she finished and then spoke quietly, just a few sentences, and hung up. He came back into the room and set the phone down. "That's the last time we hear from her," he said. "What did you say?" I asked. "If she comes here again, I'll file for a restraining order," he replied. "I'm done letting people mess with our peace." Something shifted in me then. Not anger, not sadness. Exhaustion. A deep, bone-level tiredness of apologizing for a place in a family that only remembered me when it needed something. That night, Mark surprised me again. He opened his laptop and pulled up Ava's wedding budget spreadsheet, the one she'd emailed months earlier when she begged for help. The total stared back at us. $7,500. My name was still there beside the $2,000 I'd sent, labeled floral contributions. She hadn't even bothered to remove us. Then Mark opened another file, a list he'd been keeping without my knowledge. Every expense we'd covered for my family over the years. Trips, emergencies, cash loans never repaid, thousands of dollars logged quietly, while I tried to prove something I never should have had to prove. "They never cared," he said softly. "You're not the problem." I felt something loosen in my chest, and then Mark smiled, not kindly, but focused, like someone who'd stopped reacting and started deciding. "I'm done playing defense," he said. "Now it's my turn." I didn't understand yet. I would the next morning. The next morning felt unnaturally still, like the air itself was waiting to see what we would do. Mark was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a yellow legal pad beside it, lines and arrows connecting names, dates, and amounts. He looked up when I came in, eyes sharp but calm. "She's been lying," he said. Not accusing, not emotional, certain. He turned the screen toward me. It was an old post from Ava's social media, months before the wedding, bragging about how a nonprofit had helped sponsor her ceremony through some matching grant program. The comments were full of congratulations and praise, people telling her how deserving she was. Mark scrolled. "I called the nonprofit," he said. "They've never heard of her. They don't sponsor weddings. They didn't give her a cent." I sat down slowly. "So she lied for attention?" "No," he said, tapping the screen. "She lied to erase us." He opened another document, the budget spreadsheet Ava had sent when she begged for help. The numbers were there in black and white, 7,500 total. our 2000 listed under florals. Mark pulled up the bank confirmation, showing it cleared within 24 hours. She told Matt the check bounced, he said. That's why she needed more money. Before I could process that, Mark picked up his phone and dialed. He put it on speaker. Matt answered after 2 rings, sounding distracted. Mark didn't waste time. He told Matt we were preparing a written statement because Ava had publicly claimed nonprofit funding that didn't exist, and because our contribution had been misrepresented. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Matt said quietly, "She told me your check didn't go through." Mark replied calmly, "We have the bank statement." The call ended abruptly. We sat there without speaking. My hands were shaking, not with anger, but with the realization that the humiliation at the wedding wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move in a larger pattern of deception. Ava had built a version of her life where Mark and I didn't exist except as a quiet funding source. When we showed up anyway, she pushed us into a corner and hoped we'd disappear again. That afternoon, Mark sent one message to my mother. It was short and final. He told her she'd watched Ava treat us like garbage and said we were done cleaning it up. No reply came. The next morning, Ava's social media vanished. By noon, we received an email from Matt. "It's handled," he wrote. "Please don't contact us again." The silence that followed felt different. Not the tense quiet of before, but something closer to retreat. I thought that was the end. Mark didn't. That evening, I found him on the living room floor, surrounded by old texts, emails, even Christmas cards. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Finishing it," he said. He explained he was putting together a timeline of what he called quiet disrespect. Every time my family reached out only when they needed money. Every time they excluded us and then expected generosity. The group text inviting us to the wedding now. The sticky note share. The morning after guilt messages. All of it laid out clearly, without commentary. The next day, he emailed the file to my mother. The subject line read, "Everything you chose to forget." An hour later, my phone rang. I didn't answer. 10 minutes after that, the doorbell rang. I looked through the window and saw my mother standing there alone, eyes puffy, mouth already forming words. I opened the door just long enough to say, "Don't." Then I closed it again. When Mark finally told me what he'd sent, it wasn't cruel. It was factual. Screenshots, dates, amounts, the pattern made visible. He even included the message inviting us as an afterthought. "If she still thinks this is about a chair," he said, "she's not paying attention." 2 days later, a plain white envelope appeared in our mailbox. Ava's handwriting was unmistakable, tight and pressed, like she was trying to control something already lost. I didn't open it right away. When I did, it wasn't an apology. It blamed me for ruining her wedding, accused me of tearing apart her family, and then landed the final blow. "You've always been bitter about not having a real family of your own." I folded the letter and felt oddly calm. Mark came in from the backyard and asked if it was worth reading. "No," I said, dropping it into the trash, "but it's worth remembering." That night we sat on the porch in silence, the street empty, the past finally quiet. I told him I didn't think I'd ever go back, even if they begged. He didn't argue. He just said, "Good. You were never theirs to begin with." The quiet that followed wasn't empty, it was protective. And for the first time, I wasn't bracing for the next hit. The weeks that followed felt unreal at first, like we were living in the aftermath of a storm that had already moved on, leaving debris you only notice when you finally step outside. The calls stopped. The texts dried up. Even the distant relatives who had so much to say the morning after the wedding went silent, as if someone had flipped a switch and cut the power to the entire network of commentary and judgment. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was the absence of noise, and after years of explaining myself, that absence felt like relief. Mark and I settled into a rhythm that felt lighter than anything we'd known before. We took long walks without talking about family. We cooked meals without checking our phones. We laughed about small things, stupid things, the kinds of moments that used to be interrupted by guilt or obligation. I realized how much energy I'd spent managing other people's emotions, anticipating disappointment, cushioning reactions before they even happened. Without that constant vigilance, my body finally unclenched. A month later, my cousin Nathan texted me. Just one line. "They're in damage control mode." I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't need to. I could imagine it clearly enough. Ava scrambling to reframe the story, my mother trying to smooth over cracks that had been there for years, Matt asking questions he should have asked before the wedding. None of it was my responsibility anymore. The holidays came and went without invitations. No group texts, no forced smiles. A generic card arrived, addressed to Terry and Mark, signed Love Family, with no names attached. I didn't respond. Mark tossed it into the recycling without comment. That was the moment I understood something important. Closure doesn't always arrive as an apology. Sometimes it shows up as indifference. I thought about the chair sometimes, the single folding chair in the corner with the sticky note like a warning label. It stopped hurting after a while and started feeling symbolic instead, a marker of where I'd been placed and where I no longer belonged. I wasn't angry about it anymore. I was grateful. If they'd hidden their contempt better, I might still be trying. Mark surprised me one morning with a short trip, nothing extravagant, just a weekend drive out of the city. We didn't tell anyone. We didn't ask permission. We packed light and left early, the road quiet, the future open in a way it hadn't been before. Sitting in a small diner on the way back, he reached across the table and said, "You're lighter." I smiled because he was right. I'd stopped trying to earn space in rooms that never wanted me there. Every now and then, I wondered if Ava would ever understand what she'd done, if my mother would ever see the pattern she'd helped create. But that curiosity faded quickly. Understanding wasn't required for me to move on. I didn't need them to agree. I needed them to stop. And they did. I learned something through all of this that I wish I'd known sooner. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation or the money you're willing to give. It's defined by who stands with you when you show up, not who quietly hopes you won't. I didn't walk out of that wedding empty-handed. I walked out with clarity, with my dignity intact, and with the one person who never asked me to shrink to make others comfortable. I stopped trying to belong to people who treated me like Overflow. I chose myself instead, and that choice, finally, was enough. It didn't end with an explosion. That's the part people always get wrong. There was no final screaming match, no dramatic apology, no moment where everyone suddenly understood how wrong they'd been. What happened instead was quieter and somehow more permanent. They went silent. Weeks passed without a single call. No surprise visits, no carefully worded texts pretending to check in. Even the relatives who had rushed to judge me after the wedding stopped reaching out. It was like I'd stepped out of a room and someone finally closed the door behind me. At first, the quiet felt strange, unsettling. I'd spent so many years bracing for the next comment, the next disappointment, the next reminder that I wasn't enough. Without that constant tension, I didn't know what to do with myself. Mark noticed before I did. One morning, as we were having coffee, he looked at me and said, "You're not scanning the room anymore." I asked him what he meant. He said, "You used to always look like you were waiting for someone to criticize you. You don't do that now." He was right. Life moved forward in small, ordinary ways. We started planning weekends without checking anyone else's schedule. I stopped feeling guilty for spending money on things that made me happy. I stopped explaining myself. That might have been the biggest change of all. No more justifying why I didn't call. No more defending why I didn't show up. No more softening my words so someone else wouldn't feel uncomfortable. One afternoon, my cousin Nathan messaged me again. Just a short update. Ava and Matt were fighting constantly. Money issues, trust issues, questions that couldn't be brushed aside anymore. Apparently, the story Ava had built around herself was cracking under the weight of too many lies. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Knowing wasn't the same as caring. A month later, my mother tried once more. A voicemail. No anger this time, just exhaustion. She said she missed me, that she didn't understand how things had gone so wrong, that families should find a way back to each other. I listened once, all the way through. Then I deleted it, not out of spite, but because I finally understood something she still didn't. Missing someone isn't the same as respecting them. The holidays came and went without drama. No invitations, no arguments, just quiet mornings and evenings that felt earned. Mark and I took a short trip in December. Nothing fancy, just a cabin with bad cell service and a fireplace that took too long to light. One night, sitting on the floor with our backs against the couch, he asked me if I regretted leaving the wedding the way I did. I thought about it honestly, about the chair, the note, the whispers, the years of trying to be good enough. No, I said. I regret staying as long as I did. That was the truth. I don't know what my family tells people now. I don't know which version of me they've decided to remember. The bitter one, the selfish one, the one who ruined a wedding. It doesn't matter anymore. Their story doesn't require my participation. What I do know is this. I wake up without dread. I walk into rooms without shrinking. I no longer confuse love with obligation or generosity with self-erasure. I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't proving your worth, but refusing to stand where you're not wanted. I didn't lose a family that day. I lost an illusion. And in its place, I gained a life that finally feels like mine.